Hello and welcome to the second edition of Next Generation Volleyball. Today we're going to talk about acceleration, and we define acceleration as that time frame between when the offensive contact occurs and when the defensive contact occurs. In other words, that 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 tenths of a second when we're moving towards the volleyball as it's traveling. And we find that this to be a very unique approach to the game right now. I think we're going to share with you some things that you may have never experienced or heard of before. And if you're tuning into this to learn about how to make a nice platform, for instance, or to how to hold your hands, or whether to roll your shoulders or not, we're not going to get into anything like that. This is a very, very different approach to the dynamics of defensive volleyball. And we feel that it's extremely important to move efficiently as a defender. Time is obviously it's a precious commodity when you're playing defense, and we need to use our time as best we can. And so that's essentially what this video is about. We're going to try to help all of you defensive players move efficiently to the volleyball. All right. So if I was to summarize this video, I would say one word: core. Core, core, core. I'm going to speak of that idea frequently in this video. And so we're going to right up front define it and explain to you why your core is so important. So our core, as we define it, is 4 fingers below our belly button. Right here, essentially at our belt line, right through our hip bones, right in here. And this is an important part of our body because it both initiates and terminates all human movement. Let me say that again. Our core, as defined from below our belly button through our hips, both initiates and terminates all human movement. So what that means is that as we play in defense, when we say we establish our ready position, the very first thing that's going to move as we see that ball flying towards us is our core. And we don't even know that that's happening. It's so ingrained in us. We've been doing this for our entire lives. We don't even realize it anymore. But if we're not controlling our core, we're not moving efficiently. So we're going to focus a great deal of effort today and time on making sure that we can control our core and making sure that that helps us propel to the volleyball. All right. So having said that, having shared with you how important our core is, the next important step in this thought process is to understand the importance of a ready position. So we've seen any number of videos where very little, if any, effort or time or thought goes into preparing our athletes with a solid ready position. But we believe that a good ready position is the single most important factor in getting our players to efficiently move to the volleyball. So I'm going to stop right here for a moment because I spoke in the previous video, the previous instructional, especially if you happen to catch the beach volleyball, the outdoor edition, about how it's not a good idea to read. And we shared with you that if you are moving to the volleyball before the attack occurs, that you're giving away your position as a defender in the outdoor court. And that's one important reason to not move prior to the attack. But the second one we're going to share with you right now because it's so important. We are going to ask you coaches to install a very strict discipline into your players to not move until they know with certainty where the ball is going. And the reason we're going to tell you about that is because our core is so important, number one. And the second reason is that if we are moving before contact, essentially what happens is we're destroying our ready position and we are tremendously diminishing our range. So let me repeat this because it's very, very important. If we're moving prior to the offensive contact, we are destroying our ready position and limiting our range. So proper and efficient movement on the volleyball court means that we maximize our range. And if, as that play is occurring, we're watching it, and right before contact, as that offensive attacker's arms start to swing, we're thinking, oh, it's going over there, and we take that jab step, and we see it all the time. You slow down a video, you're watching your defensive players move, bam, that crow hop is happening, right? They see the play this way or that way. Well, what happens is, what that actually is meaning is that we're instilling this great discipline into a solid foundation for our ready position, and then we destroy it by taking that crow hop. Now this becomes our default ready position. And from here, our range is tremendously diminished. And so it doesn't matter how solid our ready position is if we lose it right when we need it. So the first thing I want to share with you, coaches and players, stop the crow hop, stop the jab step, stop any of that nonsense. We're going to share with you a good solid ready position, and we can't teach you or train you to maintain it throughout the defensive response. That's up to you. All we can share with you, all we can share with you is how important it is to maintain a solid ready position. So here we go. Ready position. Mindful that we have to take care of our core. Our ready position is everything. And if we have a solid ready position, our range will be maximized. All right. So our ready position is going to be, notice how let's start with my knees. The reason I have my knees ever so slightly inward is because that will help side-to-side movement. In other words, if I have my knees a little bit out, if I'm going to move sideways, what's going to happen is I'm going to move that knee in and then go. Well, let's eliminate that tiny amount of movement, of time. Let's go ahead and keep our knees close. That will preload our feet so that if we go side to side, we're already ready to go. It's just a go. So, keeping our knees in close. Let's go take a look sideways here. Notice my heels are not touching the ground. I am fully on my toes, but not exactly on my toes. I'm on the inside ball of my foot. See that right here? So that means right around the big toe. That's where most of my pressure is, right around the big toe. And I can tell you, it's uncomfortable. I've been doing this for 30 years. It's kind of comfortable, relatively speaking. But if you haven't done this before, you're not going to like it. And I'm sorry. If you want to play defense, you got to train your body to handle this position. This is particularly stressful on your calves, but also your lower back is taxed. That's probably a good word. It's taxed. So again, let's start to review this. Heels off the ground. Weight on the inside of your toe, your big toe. Core is back, tilted back. Notice. And my back is straight. Back is straight. The reason my back is straight and not curved is because if that play is over there and I have a curved back, even if I have my head up, if my back is curved, as the play goes over there, what's going to happen? I'm going to straighten my back and then go. Well, that's taking time. We don't have that luxury. So everything in our ready position is to maximize our efficiency and to take very, very precious care of all of the time that we have. Because it's not much. All right. core behind me, back straight, head up. Where do we keep our hands? All right, I'm gonna get into we're gonna have our hands in a big way in the third edition. We'll just touch on it for now. I'll get into why that is, but we're gonna keep our hands right out here and open. We'll get into that later, why that's important. But just share with you, this is how it's gonna be. All right, knees in, heels off the ground, hips back, back straight. So notice when you obtain this position that my shoulders are going to be maybe not over my knees, but at least very, very close. So that you should be able to draw a straight line from my toe to my knee to my shoulder. And that line ought to be parallel with the ground or slightly forward. We don't want that line back. So here's what I'm trying to share with you. Notice a straight line from my toe to my shoulder, to my knee to my shoulder. And that line is going to be a little bit forward. And if not, say I'm back on my heels. See how it changes? Very subtle difference, but it's everything. If this is your ready position, we see this a lot. Back on your heels, right? Here's what happens. Ball comes at you, say it's in front of you. Now from this position, you can go side to side with your heels on the ground, and you see basketball players do that. In fact, let's back up a little bit. There's a great deal of transition, maybe is a word, between basketball and volleyball. I think a lot of basketball players wind up on the volleyball court, and they bring their training with them. And basketball players, when they play defense, tend to have a wide stance, and they're not particularly penalized if they're back on their heels a little bit. I know that that's not being taught for the most part, but it occurs on the court. I see it all the time. And the reason basketball players have a wider stance and can get on their heels is because when they're defending, they're focused up, they're bodied up on one player, playing one-on-one defense. They're only worried about back and forth. Bam, bam. And in fact, a wider stance allows them to move their body a little bit. So as that offensive player tries to scoot by them, one side or the other, they can move their body a little bit and maybe not stop them, but force them a little bit further around. And that gives them an extra quarter of a moment, right? Quarter of a second to maybe back jab step or something. But the point I'm trying to make is we're not basketball players. Basketball only has two directions to really worry about, side to side. We got 6 directions. And even more because we combine those. So our 6 directions are forward, back, one side, other side, down, and up. Excuse me. And even that's not correct because we're often forward and down, right? Forward and down at the same time. So 6 directions is not even correct. We're going to go forward and down. Sometimes we're going to go sideways, forward, and down all at the same time. So we have a far more complicated reaction dynamic than any other sport. Basketball, baseball, infielders I've studied, infielders really only worry about side to side. I know that sometimes they charge the ball, but their time frame for charging the ball is not terribly limited. So they don't have to be efficient on moving forward. If you want your infielder to charge the ball, he can afford to jab step like that and go forward and make the defensive play. We don't have that opportunity. So I've seen a great deal of practices where coaches are trying to eliminate this jab step, right? So they have their players in their ready position, and they ask them to move side to side, forward or something. And here's what often happens is, if the player's going to move forward, what do? Back, forward. Well, obviously, if you're trying to pick up a dink in front of you, and your first movement is back, that's not terribly efficient. And we see it over and over and over again. Perhaps at the end of this video, I'll share some clips of what's going on the volleyball court. That kind of thing happens all the time. Any coach knows this. Coaches, I just don't think know how to fix it. Well, that's one of the things we're going to try to approach today. How to fix that false step, right? Going back to move forward. How do we fix that? That's what we're talking about today. And the reason a player is going to take a step backward is because we've got to stay loaded onto that part of our front of our toes. If we do that, if we're forward enough with our core behind us, and remember our core is initiating the movement. If we can keep this behind us, we can power forward. We can do that without this first. But we got to keep our core behind us. So the moment we let our defenders rock back on their heels and bring their hips ever so slightly forward, and that dink happens in front of us, what's going to happen is that's going to be our first step. That's going to be our first step, because what's happening is that we want to move our core forward, and it's already too forward to control. So here's our proper ready position. Here's a too frequent default ready position. When this happens, we got to step behind us to regain core control, because we've lost it by letting our core come forward before action is required. So let me try to, I know this is a little complicated, and I'm terribly sorry. I'm doing my best to try to share with you how to control your core. But please pay attention here. Core is behind our movement. Core is initiating our movement. So what's happening from this point is we see that play ahead of us, and our core is going to move ever so slightly. So if we're nice and forward with our core behind us, if our core is initiating movement, it's just going to drive us forward. Our core goes and our feet go. You don't even have to think about it. It just happens. But that will only happen if we can continue to keep our core behind our movement. If we let this core come forward a little bit, we've lost that opportunity to drive ourselves forward. So we have to regain it by stepping back and then going forward. So let's keep our core behind us. Keep our weight on our toes, inside part of our toes. Keep our knees a little bit inside of each other, a little bit cocked a little bit. And the next mistake I see a lot of players make, too wide a stance. So here's what happens. When we get too wide, and this probably doesn't seem all that unusual, this kind of step right here. But this, I can promise you, is too wide. So here's what happens. Even if we've got everything under control, as far as our core is concerned, if we're too wide, we have limited our ability to go side to side. So what happens when we're here is we'll take that first step sideways, and now we're way too wide. And we've lost core control. So if we start wide, we step even wider, and now let's back up. Remember our comment about, for instance, a sprinter, 100-meter dash person? Well, when they start, they're taking very small steps. Whenever we're trying to accelerate our body, we want to take small steps to begin with. So if we start wide and then take a step or even wider, we have lost our ability to take small steps. So now this next step is going to be giant. And we can't do it. So here's what often happens when we're too wide. Jab step, and let's say that ball is, we're trying to forward collapse. Well, now we're too wide and we've lost core control. Take a look at this yourself. When we take a wide step, our core comes forward ever so slightly. So here's what happens. Let's say that ball is forward to our right. We're trying to get it. We've started too wide. We take that first step, we're extra wide. Now we can't control our core. Here's what happens. We just sit. So we see that ball there, and instead of accelerating to it, taking that next step and forward collapsing, instead of taking that second step, small step, forward collapse. Instead of that, what happens if we're not careful? We start too wide, we take a big step, we've lost core control. So here's what happens. Boom, and then we're just here, and that might look okay, but what's really happening is our core has stopped traveling towards the ball. So that brings us to rule number 2. Rule number 1 is maintain core control. Rule number 2, when we accelerate to the ball, our core must always accelerate to the ball. So, let's say we're forward collapsing. We see this all the time. Say it's right in front of us. Ball happens, the play happens, we're too wide. Take a step, often onto our heel. Once we step onto our heel, we're done. So here's what happens. Boom, and our core just drops. And we've lost our ability to accelerate to the ball, and we've ruined our range. So what we're trying to do, keep our feet close, small step, forward collapse, out we go. And our core continues to accelerate to the ball. Well, if we're too wide, take a step onto our heel, we've lost core control, and our core just drops to the ground. And we can no longer accelerate our core to the ball. And so it can look good, sort of, on TV, or on a video, by stepping on our heel, dropping our core, and still collapse forward. And that can be effective, but not as effective as it ought to be. So what we're trying to share with you, let me show you from the side so you can see my core. What we're trying to share with you is our core has to always accelerate towards the contact point. All right. So here's too wide a stance, stepping onto our heel, losing core control. Show you how that looks. Boom, down we go, and that's as far as we get. Let's show you a little more efficient way. Our feet are a little closer together. Small step, not onto our heel. Our step is still onto our toe. Here's what it looks like. Forward collapse, boom, boom. Notice our core continues to accelerate to the ball. So what we're trying to share with you again and again and again is discipline our core, know where it is, recognize that our core initiates and terminates all human movement. All right. Side-to-side movement, typically we're not seeing too much trouble there, unless we're too wide. So if we're really too wide, what can sometimes happen is when we're moving side, that's our first step. This is what happens. If you see that, you're really, really too wide on your step. So we want our first movement, we always want to pay attention as coaches to first step accuracy. So, as we already talked about, if our first step to go forward is there, boom, and then forward, well, we can see we got a problem. And we got to fix that. So, the next one that I see never occurs correctly is moving backwards. Moving backwards is, I guess we could call it the canary in the coal mine. If your athletes cannot move backwards efficiently, then you know your athletes are not having very good core control. And I'll share with you how that occurs. Again, feet shoulder width apart, toes over knees, shoulders over knees, knees over toes. Right here. Heels off the ground, knees in. If we got to move backwards, the way that happens is, say I'm going to go right back there. I see the play happen over my left shoulder. What I got to do is I got to shift my weight to my right foot. I'll show you how to do this facing you. I gotta shift to my right and then turn and go. This is very, very difficult to do instantly. But if our players are not doing this, you can guarantee they have poor core control. So, when you do this correctly, it looks simple. Bam and go. But this is why, let's back up a little bit, this is why we cannot read. Because if you're seeing the play, and you're crow hopping, you're losing core control, and then the play is behind you, you're already moving forward and the play's behind you, you're sunk. You're just sunk. So that crow hop or that jab step completely destroys your ability to take anything behind you. And a lot of plays happen behind you. Remember, we gotta move 6 directions. More than 6 because we combo some of them, right? So again, we're gonna talk about accelerating to the volleyball. So if the play is behind you, we wanna make sure our knees over toes, shoulders over knees, core behind us, weight on the inside balls of our feet at shoulder width apart. The play's behind us. We're going to rock onto one leg and go. And boy, that looks easy, doesn't it? And yet, how often have you seen it happen on a volleyball court? I'm going to say you're going to search a lot of footage before you see somebody do that correctly. Because here's what you usually see: back up, upright, turn and go. That's too slow. You've lost a step. How many people would like to regain a step when they're playing defense? All right. So let's review again. Plays behind us. Rock onto a foot. Rock on either foot. We'll say we're going to rock on this foot. Rock onto that foot, keeping our heel off the ground, our weight onto the ball of that foot. First step accuracy. Rotate to it and go. All right. So what we're trying to share again and again, core control. Let's try to review some of the concepts that we've thrown out so far. All right. The most difficult play we have found is combining forward and down. So, or forward, sideways, and down. That's the hardest thing to do. To do efficiently. So what we're trying to do is make sure, watch my core and watch how it is going to accelerate forward to the ball throughout the defensive response. Here it is, there's the play, small step, forward collapse, and go. At speed, looks like this. Boom. So this is going to bring me to our next point, which is a roll. Sometimes we call it a barrel roll. And I see coaches teaching this all the time.